corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Consequently, the answer to why we are here is quite simply to expose political chicanery, to educate, to motivate, to activate, and to begin the restoration of integrity, honesty, and transparency back into the leadership of our state Republican hierarchy. Additionally, we are here to emphatically announce that our conservative ideals and principles are here to stay, and that we won't be intimidated, bullied over, marginalized, or concede our values no matter what forces are brought to bear. This will not be an easy nor short road to travel, but a necessary journey that must be taken if we wish to once again restore our state party's guiding principles back to those of our founder and first Republican, Abraham Lincoln. To quote Ronald Reagan, "You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We will preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we will sentence them to take the first step into 1,000 years of darkness. If we fail, at least let our children and our children's children say of us, we justified our brief moment here. We did all that could be done." The first speaker this evening is going to be Dave Kopas, who is president of Mara.
Wow. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you all for coming this evening. Starting already. I didn't come up here with a script of any kind, and it'd be a rarity for me to do such things, as I really do like to speak from the heart. And I think a lot of the people out there are tired of being spoken to from a script. It often leads nowhere for us. So, myself, I'm really just an angry country boy. I often speak, and for those of you who have heard this before, I apologize for being redundant, but it's simply part of my story, is I had an extremely close relationship with my grandparents. My grandfather was a Republican, my grandmother a Democrat, and that was the trend in the family. The men were Republican and women were Democrats. And by way of comparison, my grandmother, the Democrat, is probably more conservative than our state leadership is today. Party. They were very family oriented. That was the take-home message. I didn't know about the Democrat-Republican thing until I was a lot older. But the appeal with my grandparents was that they were family oriented. They knew the importance of a good, solid, nurturing family. Something that is almost extinct in this state, in this country right now. Parents don't sit down at the table with their children and talk and eat anymore. That closeness isn't there. Things aren't passed down from one generation to the next. And for many, many years, because I didn't know what to do, with my family being split like that, I wound up being unenrolled for a long time. And when I started to see what was going on in the political environment around me, I realized why there were so many other people unenrolled. It seemed that the two parties no longer were representing their constituents. And being from a small town, and really being small government at my roots, I eventually, as I looked at the political landscape around me and gained a better understanding of how it works procedurally, the rules and the bylaws associated with it. And then I looked at the national landscape, and to me it was an obvious choice that I needed to register Republican and fight for those values that were the principles, the core principles of the Republican Party, what few that were left remaining, and those that have seemed to be pushed by the wayside needed to be defended. And I registered as a Republican. And to this day, I'm committed, and I will never re-register as anything else. And I got even more involved. I started, hanging around candidates' campaigns, seeing how that part of it works. And come around 2000, 2008, or 2007, 2008, a familiar name to me, someone who I've kind of been partial to since the late 80s, decided to make a run for president. And it Dr. Ron Paul. And I got involved. There was a lot of little meetup groups starting to spring up around me, and I said, boy, I'm gonna go to one of these little house meetings and see how that goes. And I kind of liked the camaraderie. And what a learning experience that was. For those of you that want to think back to the 2007, 2008 campaign, a lot of what Ron Paul's people did, it was an enormous teaching effort. I mean, he was legitimately running for president, but he wanted his followers not just to be followers, he wanted his followers to be leaders. He wanted to understand the political environment around them. So I learned what it was to be a delegate, how to become a delegate. I learned what canvassing and wearing out your shoes was all about. Hours of phone calls. Well, I decided, you know, the RTCs in the state have been eviscerated. There's not much left there. You see, they don't want an RTC in every town. That's too many RTCs to be controlled from the top down, you see. You have too many free thinkers out there. So as I realized, I look across 351 towns in Massachusetts, and not even 50% of them had representation at the Republican level. I realized we had some problems. I revived my RTC, but it was defunct, nothing there in my town for representation. And I just took those steps. Found myself at the caucus and stood up there, and I said, I'm a Romney delegate, and I gave the best Ron Paul speech that I could. I wound up getting the second highest number of votes. I was beating state representatives and state committee people and senators, and all these people were falling by the wayside, and all of this grassroots energy in that room. I can remember walking in there that morning. I was one of the first ones there. I was excited and nervous, and I just didn't know what to do. I showed up, and as people were coming in, I'm listening to the establishment going, oh, this is going to be a great caucus. Oh, another 15 minutes go by. We haven't had this many people in years. And oh my God, this is the biggest group we've ever had. And I'm like, why? I mean, me and a little group of people got around. We said we want to run, and we made phone calls and said, come on out, be involved. We thought we were just doing something run-of-the-mill. Routine happened all the time. The establishment didn't think so. They couldn't generate that excitement if they tried. They can't buy that excitement to this day. Well, you know, I made my rounds. I shook hands with everybody, and I talked to the young, I talked to the old, and you know, again, there was no script. I told them what was on my mind, and I listened to what was on their mind. But when I got up to the mic and gave my speech, I said, this is who I am, and this is the message I'm bringing to the convention. I'm a Romney delegate, and I'm going to go there to make him the best candidate that I can. And that would certainly mean swaying him on some things more palatable. But I had a message. I was honest with the caucus goers that that was the message I was bringing to the convention, and they elected me. Well, my national or state committee man was not all that thrilled. He tried to get me to not even run and get up there and make a speech, because they knew we were coming. They just didn't know how many, from where, and who they were going to be. But we showed up that day, and the nomination process took place. And he tried his darndest, and he figured out that I was going to be one of the delegates, and said, you know, we got to unite. We got to unite as a party and get around the main candidate here, and you know, you would really be collecting some political capital. Boy, I could barf in my pocket. I reminded him, I don't need none of that, no thank you. I said, I'm going to get up and give the best speech I can. I would hope I'd have your support. Well, this state committee man, a self-proclaimed progressive Republican, you know, modern guy. He said, you got to give a little. Got to be some compromise. We can't be so rigid in our ideals. And I said, well, I disagree. I feel strongly about those things. My three issues are life, liberty, and property. And I said, I'm not going up there to compromise on those things. I think the caucus goers you know, I'm going to give them that as my message and let them decide. If they want more of the same, let them vote for it. If they want someone with a message and committed to it, well, they'll have me to vote for it. Well, he just said, he was pretty angry. I didn't back down. I went up. They're counting the votes. And he comes up to me just as angry as could be. And he says, you know what, people like you come up here and you get angry and you spout out for 2 weeks and you disappear. And he said, you don't do anything for the party. And I said, well, I don't know why you think you got my politics pigeonholed so well, but you seem to know what you're talking about. Well, 1.5 months later, he was resigning from the state committee. I was the chair of my RTC. I bumped into this little group called the Republican Assembly. And I went and checked these folks out because I wanted to see, you know, is this just another wing of the Republican Party? Because there's a lot of those out there, these regional Republican groups, you know. And my first thought that that's exactly what it was. And I got to know some of the folks involved, and I realized they are a group of reformers. They're all about reform. So I got involved with them. You're my state committee man, he's fading away in nowhere, and things didn't go well for him. He's not much of a fighter, I guess. Well, you know, they challenged me within 24 hours. They challenged a whole bunch of us that won. About 1/3 of the state's delegation were no-namers, people that weren't part of the establishment and weren't lugging water for the establishment. And every single one of us got challenged. And one, there was only one that didn't make it to the convention that time, and he legitimately missed the registration date. You know, and we were a group of principled people. We believe in going by the rules, and that person rightfully didn't go, and we concurred with that message. But what was shockingly obvious is that you can't be a newcomer and you can't be a part of the grassroots, follow the rules, get elected, want to be involved, and then think they're going to welcome you. That was not going to happen. And you know, it seemed that the more they did that, the more resolve started to build inside of me. And that is exactly what we need in every single activist that's surrounding campaigns like Karen Anderson's and Mr. Fisher's. We need to keep these people involved, get that fire in their belly. And let me tell you, don't think you're ever going to go into their political pig pen and have them not try to cheat you out of something, because they don't have the energy, they don't have the message, they've got to fall back on something. And it's going to be every dirty little trick they can to keep your voice minimized. And for that, you should take that. When they cheat you out of something, you wear that as a badge of honor. You've made them go to an extreme that no party official should. You've exposed them. Only relentless pressure is going to do that. At any one of these battles, you're going to hear an awful lot this evening from different people who have had it tucked to them in a number of different ways. And it's by sticking in there. Believe me, there's nothing they like better than to have someone go, oh, I can't believe this, I followed the rules and you cheated on me, okay, I'm unenrolled, take that, GOP. They go home and they party over that. That's what they want. They want you to quit and unenroll. You're now outside of the political system. You're not part of the party system anymore. So my take-home message to anyone in this room who is angry, feeling disenfranchised, feeling like they don't have support, number one, know that you have support. Number two, the most in-your-face, worst thing that you can do to a corrupted party is to stick in there and not leave. I'm asking you to join me. Stand with me. If you don't want to join Mary, you don't have to. You have to stand for the principles. I'm up here today to talk about principled politics. There's going to be a reform of the state GOP. I'm hoping every person in this room is going to join me in that effort. Reform is coming, and before 2016, this is my promise, before 2016, we're going to be in a position to take that state committee. We are 6 votes away. Let me finish with this, is that moment that I got elected as a delegate, as one little nobody, one little country bumpkin can jump into their pig pen and raise holy heck with these guys. So every single one of you, I expect something from you. I expect you to fight. We need it, and it starts today. Reform starts today. Thank you.
And now Mark Bishop will address the Mass GOP 2010 State Convention.
Thank you, Mike. If you like the way that Dave Kopax just spoke, I'd invite you to go to the Morrow website because he writes much better than he speaks. And he speaks very, very well. There's a press release that he did, maybe, was it 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, over a summer, and it's what got me to join Morrow, and it's what got me to run for governor. It's a great organization. Like Dave said, you don't have to join it, but please investigate it. It's worth your while. I'm here to talk about the 2010 State Convention on my behalf and also on behalf of Kamal Jain. Kamal Jain ran, for those of you who don't know, ran for state auditor 4 years ago. He had an experience there at the convention, and I'm going to speak on his behalf about it. I know it very well, very much in detail. I'll talk to you about that. So, going into this year's convention, my campaign wanted to know what happened 4 years ago so we could prepare as best we could for the convention. So before I met Kamal Jain, I was at an RTC meeting in Dudley, and there I met a small group, just 7 delegates that were at the convention 4 years ago. And the delegates there told me that their delegation of 7 voted 5 for Charlie Baker and 2 for Christy Myhouse, who was trying to run for governor at that time. That's how they voted. And actually, the person who was telling this story was one of those 2 that voted for Christy Myhouse. However, somehow, when the votes got tallied, those 7 delegates from Dudley all voted for Charlie Baker and 0 for Christy Myhouse. So that was sort of an eye-opener for us. And then staff from the Christy Myhouse campaign told me that long after Christy had abandoned his campaign, he and his attorneys were able to finally see the tally sheets, and they said they had about 22% of the vote, and we only need 15% of the vote. So we knew that the vote had been tampered, and that was a good thing to know about because it sort of prepared us for this convention. But we also wanted to know what happened to Kamal. For those of you who were there, you probably heard that after the vote was taken, it was announced that he did not get his 15%. But what Kamal did, he and his legal team went to the Mass GOP and they asked for a recount. And they were allowed a recount. And the story that you probably know today is that after the recount, sure enough, Kamal got his 15%, and he was allowed on the ballot, and he ran in a primary for state auditor. Well, the story is, there's thousands and thousands of votes. So what if you missed 1 or 2 and 1 or 2 votes? That's how it went down. But here's the real story. After the initial vote, the number of total votes was known. So that when the recount was taken, they knew exactly how many votes were needed to get 15%. And when Kamal got that 15%, the Mass GOP said, "Do you want us to continue the recount?" And Kamal said, "Well, will I be on the ballot?" And they said, "Absolutely, you got your 15%. So Kamal was nice, and he said, "No, you can stop recounting, I'm on the primary ballot." He could have had 20%, perhaps 20 to 30%. We don't know that. So the story is that the Mass GOP, maybe 1 or 2 votes, a normal recount. That's not what happened. There were many more votes there for Kamal. Similar things that happened with the Dudley delegation. However, knowing all that, what did that do for us in preparing for the convention? There were 2 people that came to visit me from my hometown, Karen Polito, our Lieutenant Governor nominee, and Chanel Prunier, who's our state national committee woman. They both live in my hometown. Karen's my state rep for a long time. They came to my business 2 separate occasions, and they asked me not to run for governor. Unlike the Democrats, who want many people to run for offices and they love contested primaries, they came to talk me out of running for governor. Well, they didn't succeed. But when they came to talk me out of running for governor, I asked them something as well, and I didn't succeed. I told them what I knew about the delegation from Dudley and others and Kamal, and I asked them, you guys are very high-ranking in the Mass GOP. Is there anything that you can do to assure me that this won't happen in 2014 at this year's state convention? And they didn't have to think about it. They actually said, no, there's nothing we can do. These are high-ranking members of the Mass GOP. So this is what we knew going into the state convention. We knew about vote tampering. We knew about fraud. And then most importantly, we knew that when high-ranking officials, members of the Mass GOP, were asked if they could do anything to prevent this type of thing, they said no. We can see a pattern here. You'll see it here throughout the night. And it's time that we stop that. And that's why we're here tonight. So thank you, and look forward to talking to you about this again in the future.
Thank you, Mike. Next, we have Tom Leonard, who's going to address the 2012 delegate caucuses for the National GOP Convention.
Thank you. My name is Tom Leonard. I'm here tonight to speak with you regarding the events that occurred during the 2012 election cycle concerning delegates and alternate delegates to the Republican National Convention who were unlawfully removed and replaced by the Massachusetts GOP. To provide a bit of background, I became involved with the Liberty Cause in late 2011. I became very interested in the ideology of Ron Paul around this time. Specifically, I believe in small government, individual liberty, and the idea that the United States should not be the policeman of the world. Ron Paul encapsulated all of these ideas. I decided to attend an event at the Liberty Clubhouse in Worcester, Massachusetts, and was very surprised to find such a large group of people who are invested in the same small government ideology as myself. From late 2011 to February 2012, we worked relentlessly in phone banking in an attempt to get Ron Paul as many votes as possible in the Massachusetts Republican presidential primary, which took place in February 2012. It was our intent to have Dr. Paul score at least 15% of the vote, so he would be allotted at a minimum 3 delegates and 3 alternate delegates from Massachusetts. Unfortunately, our efforts fell short, and no candidate, with the exception of Mitt Romney, achieved more than 15% of the vote. Therefore, all delegates from Massachusetts were bound to Mitt Romney. I continue to stay very involved with the Liberty Clubhouse after the 2012 presidential primary, as our mission was only half complete. Many casual political observers may not be aware that there is a caucus that takes place in Massachusetts shortly after the Republican presidential primary to allot delegates from each congressional district to the Republican National Convention. Although these delegates are bound to vote for Mitt Romney at the convention, they have a second and equally important task. The second task for delegates at the convention is to create a party platform that the Republican Party must follow until its next convention is called to order. The 3 points that we wish to emphasize in the party platform are clear and concise: audit the Fed, end the wars, and protect internet freedom. Unfortunately, due to the unlawful actions of the Massachusetts GOP, our delegates were not able to deliver this message to Tampa. Now I will discuss with you the events that occurred on the day of the Massachusetts GOP caucus and the weeks following that caucus. These events eventually led to the unlawful disqualification of duly elected delegates and the discarding of votes from registered Republicans by the Massachusetts GOP. The Massachusetts GOP caucus occurred on April 28, 2012. The rules of the caucus were quite simple. Any resident who was a registered Republican prior to February 15, 2012 had the option to attend the caucus and elect 3 delegates and 3 alternate delegates to the Republican National Convention. There were 2 slates consisting of 3 delegates and 3 alternates that were passed out to each caucus. One slate consisted of delegates and alternate delegates that were closely aligned with the Mitt Romney campaign. The second slate of delegates, the Ronald Reagan Liberty slate, consisted of delegates who believed in a small government philosophy or closely aligned to the ideology of Ron Paul. For the purpose of brevity, I will focus on the events that occurred in two specific caucuses. First, I will focus on the events that occurred in District 7, which is the district I represented. Second, I will focus on the events that occurred in District 8. The District 7 caucus occurred in Randolph, Massachusetts. All attendees to the caucus followed the rules and regulations set forth by the Massachusetts Republican Party for the selection of delegates to the Tampa, Florida 2012 Republican Convention. Per Rule 4.4 of the Massachusetts Republican Party plan for the selection of delegates to the Tampa, Florida 2012 National Convention, all attendees did, quote, certify their qualifications to participate in the caucus by signing statements including their names, addresses, and Republican affiliation. In District 7, our Liberty delegates handed out the Ronald Reagan Liberty slate, listing our names as prospective delegates and alternate delegates to all attendees of the caucus. Once the caucus was called to order, all prospective delegates and alternate delegates were instructed of Rule 4.5 of the aforementioned Mass GOP party plan for the selection of delegates, which states, each nominee for election as a pledged congressional district delegate or alternate delegate shall express to a commitment to a qualifying presidential candidate and agree to be bound to vote for that candidate on the first such roll call unless released by such candidate as required by law. So, by placing our names in nomination, each delegate and alternate delegate was pledging to vote for Mitt Romney on the first roll call at the Republican National Convention. There were two slates handed out at the District 7 caucus. One slate for the Ronald Reagan Liberty candidates, the other was for the Mitt Romney delegate candidates. Each delegate and alternate delegate was given the opportunity to speak for no more than 2 minutes as to why they felt they should represent District 7 in Tampa. Shortly after the speeches were concluded, the caucus chairwoman announced that the balloting would begin. However, she mentioned that those individuals who are not on the voter roll as registered Republicans would be forced to cast provisional ballots, which would be opened and counted at a later point in time. I must mention at this point in time, there is no mention of provisional ballots in the party plan for the selection of delegates to the RNC. Rule 4.4 of the previously referenced party plan clearly states that all attendees, quote, certify their qualifications to participate in the caucus by signing statements including their names, addresses, and Republican affiliation. Therefore, each attendee should have had the right to vote on a ballot that would be counted at the caucus. Unfortunately, a uniform ballot was not provided to all attendees of the District 7 caucus. In short, the voting occurred and all individuals listed on the Ronald Reagan Liberty slate were awarded delegate and alternate delegate slots to the 2012 RNC. At this point, after following the Massachusetts Republican Party plan for the selection of delegates to the Tampa, Florida 2012 National Convention, and after following Robert's Rules of Order, all business for the caucus was deemed finished by the caucus chairwoman, and the caucus was closed. In District 8, a much different course of events unfolded on the afternoon of April 28, 2012, Upon entering the District 8 caucus, all attendees, in accordance with Rule 4.4 of the Massachusetts Republican Party plan for the selection of delegates, did indeed certify their qualifications to participate in the caucus by signing statements, names, addresses, and Republican affiliation. The caucus was then called to order, and the following statement was made by one of the Romney slate delegates. His name is Matt Sisk. Please watch the following video. Okay, it's actually going to the left. Yeah, there. Yep, that one there. Yep, exactly.
There was no provisional ballot. So the Republican State Committee tried to make
4 years ago this was not done, there were no provisional ballots. Unfortunately, Mr. Sisk was not aware that the Massachusetts Republican Party plan for the selection of delegates for 2012 made no mention of provisional ballots. The only rule in the party plan that states for eligibility for participation in the caucus is Rule 4.4, which I've stated a number of times. At this point, the voting occurred and the Romney slate of delegates and alternate delegates all achieved the highest vote totals. However, the vote totals for the majority of elected delegates and alternate delegates were within the margin of doubt, where the elected delegate or alternate delegate may change if the provisional ballots were counted. As you recall from the previous video, Matt Sisk made it abundantly clear that provisional ballots would not be counted before the business of District 8 caucus was concluded. After the results were announced, many Liberty delegate supporters were understandably incensed that the provisional ballots were not counted. Many attendees demanded the provisional ballots be counted before the business of the caucus was closed. At this point, Matt Sisk again took to the microphone and provided the following statement. Oh, yeah, no problem. Actually, I can preface what he said there. In the second video I was going to show, Mr. Sisk states that, quote, "This is a strategy used by the Ron Paul people." What Matt Sisk forgot to mention was that the business in the District 8 caucus was conducted in a manner inconsistent with the balloting rules that were set forth in the Massachusetts Republican Party delegate selection plan. Rule 4.4 again was clearly ignored. Everyone should have been given a uniform ballot, no provisional ballot should have existed, and all votes should have been counted prior to the close of caucus business. Moving ahead, by late afternoon of April 28, 2012, I was aware that the Ronald Reagan Liberty slate had achieved 36 delegates and alternate delegates. This number does not include potential Ronald Reagan Liberty slate delegates and alternate delegates who should have won slots, but did not because of the presence of this provisional ballot rule. Now, there are two remaining issues at hand. First, the Ronald Reagan Liberty slate wanted to ensure that the provisional ballots in all districts would be counted, and that no Massachusetts Republican was disenfranchised of their right to the delegate selection process. Second, all elected Ronald Reagan Liberty slate delegates were eagerly awaiting the certification to the RNC by the Massachusetts GOP. On May 29, 2012, members of the Liberty Clubhouse became aware of a secret meeting by the Allocation Committee in Marlborough, Massachusetts. It was believed this meeting was being conducted to determine the outcome of the provisional ballots that were cast during the various caucuses. Many Liberty-minded individuals became aware of this meeting and decided to protest outside the hotel where the meeting occurred. The protesters had one simple goal: to make sure the Allocation Committee would count all the votes. In fact, the chairman of the Allocation Committee, Stephen Zikorsky, was not made aware of the secret meeting being conducted in Marlborough, Massachusetts on May 29th. And you can see his name right here is the chair who drafted the rules. And please watch the video of Mr.
Let me see if they'll play. I don't have the mic.
Oh, yep, no problem. I actually do have the text of what he said. So, Mr.
I don't know why there's usually a volume control on the top of the.
Oh, yep, no problem. I can
don't have one.
give what he had stated. Mr. Zikorsky, the chair of the Allocation Committee, clearly states, "I do not believe the hearing should even have been held." He goes on to state, quote, "The rules state that the procedural matters had to be brought up at the caucus itself. If those problems had not been resolved by the person who was making the protest and the caucus chairman, the parliamentarian at the state party was standing by all during the morning until the caucuses were over at the state committee headquarters to settle any disputes that came up." Now the chairman of the Allocation Committee here today was also a candidate for delegates. He was also a member of the Rules Committee. He's also an attorney. So he knew the rules, and he knew the procedure, and he never complained about anything at that caucus. Nothing happened until the results came in, and they weren't what they wanted. And that's my complaint, and I had no dog in the race. I was not a Ron Paul supporter. I did not even attend the caucus in my district, in the 6th Congressional District. And my purpose in being here, I was the chairman of the Rules Committee, as I think I may have mentioned to you, was just that I wanted to see fairness, and this would be a great injustice if they overturned the election. The allocation, and that's the end of his quote, the allocation committee was clearly doing whatever it could within its power to ensure that the provisional ballots would not be counted. Fast forward to a meeting of the Mass GOP State Committee, which occurred sometime on or between May 30th, 2012 and June 5th, 2012, in which a large number of liberty-minded individuals attended and tried to make sure that the provisional ballots would be counted. After 2 rounds of voting by state committee members, Mass GOP State Committee members decided that the provisional ballots would not be counted. Votes by registered Republicans would not be counted. Now let me speak with you regarding the national delegate and alternate delegate affidavit that all delegates and alternate delegates were received on or shortly after June 5th, 2012. All Ronald Reagan Liberty Slate delegates and alternate delegates, if you don't mind put those up, the PDFs? Okay, all Ronald Reagan Liberty Slate delegates and alternate delegates received the affidavit you are now being shown on the projector screen on or shortly after June 5th, 2012. We were instructed that we must sign and return the affidavit to the Mass GOP headquarters on or before 12 p.m. on June 8, 2012, or risk being disqualified as elected to the RNC, delegates to the RNC. There were a large number of elected delegates and alternate delegates. Mass GOP did not wish to sign the Mass GOP affidavit as the language contained in the document was in direct conflict with the language in section 4.5 of the Massachusetts Republican Party plan for the selection of delegates to Tampa, Florida, which is the document on the right-hand side here. The affidavit we were told must be signed stated, I certify under the pain and penalty of perjury that on the first ballot of the 2012 Republican National Convention, I will affirmatively vote for Mitt Romney, the winner of the 2012 Massachusetts presidential primary. However, the language in section 4.5 of the aforementioned party plan that we bound ourselves to at the district caucuses states each nominee for election as a pledged congressional delegate or alternate delegate shall express a commitment to a qualifying presidential candidate and agree to be bound to vote for that candidate on the first such roll call, unless released by such candidate as required by law. As it was still possible at the time we received the Massachusetts GOP affidavit that Mitt Romney may still release his delegates, I and many other Liberty delegates felt we could not break the pledge we made at the caucus and therefore submitted our own modified version of the affidavit. Many elected delegates and alternate delegates also signed and returned the original affidavit that we received from the Mass GOP. After returning our affidavits by noon on June 8, 2012, we waited for a response from the Mass GOP. Approximately a week later, we were notified that 17 delegates and alternate delegates were disqualified and would not be receiving certification to attend the Republican National Convention, myself included. Shortly after these 17 delegates and alternate delegates were disqualified, Brad Wyatt, who was one of our leaders of the Liberty Clubhouse, filed a state and federal lawsuit in an attempt to get an injunction against the ruling issued by the Mass GOP. We were represented by attorneys Robert Dell and Lee Goodman. The lawsuit continued through the summer of 2012 and on or until shortly after August 21st, 2012, when we were notified by Brad Wyatt that he was considering dropping the lawsuit. It is my understanding that Brad Wyatt contacted each delegate and alternate delegate to explain he had received information from the Mass GOP that they were interested in a compromise. And they would allow 3 delegates and 3 alternate delegates to replace the 17 disqualified delegates and alternate delegates. And just finishing up one sentence here. I stated I had reservations regarding this compromise, although the majority of disqualified individuals indicated they would like to proceed and they wished to get as many delegates as possible to Tampa. I have much more information I would like to share with you, but I believe I've gone over my time, and feel free to speak with me after the presentation if you have any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Now we're going to hear from Tiffany Howard. She's the vice chairman of the MARA, and she's going to speak about the 2013 chairman's race.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mark, for putting this on. This is fabulous. I'm not quite as eloquent as Dave. I normally do prepare remarks, but I would have had to miss all my sleep last night. So I'm not willing to give up my sleep, so here I am. Before I get to the 2013 election, which brought us Kirsten Hughes as our state GOP chair, I'm going to back up just a little bit and tell you a little bit about me, my background. Committee member. I was a state committee member for about a year and a half. I participated in 2 chair elections. The first one was Frank McNamara against Bob McGinn. And during that whole process, they were putting a whole lot of pressure on the state committee folks. And I got a phone call from Senator Scott Brown directing me to vote for Mr. Bob McGinn. And I argued with him. I said, why? Why should I vote for Bob McGinn? I was a Frank McNamara girl. And he proceeded to tell me about how important the money was. Bob McGinn is very, very, very good with money. He's going to make sure all the money goes to the right places and keep a track of the money. Well, having been in the state committee meetings, nobody knew where any money was going. They presented a treasury report every meeting, and I'm an accountant for a living, and I had through tables. I couldn't figure out, I liken those meetings to, if you've ever, watched a video, been sucked into watching a video, and you spend 5 minutes and then you go, well, there's 5 minutes of my life I'm never gonna get back. Imagine a state committee meeting where you walk out after 3 hours. What's that? Nothing is accomplished. I've seen a whole lot of you folks, I've seen in the back, because they stick us behind a rope if you're not in the state committee member, they put you in the corner, like you need a little dust cap. And people jump up every couple of minutes and they say, I call for adjournment. What? We're in the middle of what? Okay, well, anyways, during that election, there had been groundwork laid by grassroots activists, getting people onto the state committee and getting people involved in their RTCs and getting people out there doing, because without doing, we're never going to accomplish. And we got a fair amount of those 80 folks on board during that first election. 22 folks. 13 months later, with all the work that the grassroots did and Mara did and the efforts that were put in, when that next election rolled around, oh, by the way, I got redistricted out after I told Scott Brown to take a walk. Coincidence? Don't know. But I was happy with my redistricting because Deb Martell and, yes, she deserves a round. Deb Martell and Marie Bergeron are now in that district. They're awesome. They're great, and we thank you both. Marie's not here, but thank you, Deb, for all the hard work and sitting there hours. After that redistricting, and the 13 months later, when this next election came up with Rick Green, I'll tell you a little bit about it, but at the end of that, we ended up with half, almost, of the votes in that election. In 13 months, to double our numbers on the state committee is phenomenal. I can't even, I would have never expected it going into that 13 months. And I was at that meeting even though I was no longer a part of the state committee. And I can't even begin to describe, the state committee is 5 parts incompetence, 10 parts hostility, and 95% evil. They're just evil. I'm sorry. You gotta morally bankrupt. Thank you. Yes, you gotta call it as you see it, folks. And these people are just the voting occurred after much floor debate. We'll call it a debate. We won't call it a fight because it started out debating. The voting occurred within the state committee. There was a bunch of us folks behind the stanchions standing there watching. The vote occurred, and then they took all the votes out of the room. Went in a little back room, smoking cigars or whatever. numbers at first. They just announced Kirsten Hughes as the winner, and we're just supposed to accept and move on. After a little bit more debate and probably a little bit of argument, and some really good people standing up for us, like Bill Gilmeister. Sorry if I can't think of names right now. I'm still recovering a little bit from some bronchitis and start choking. You'll know why. They gave us numbers. A couple people abstained. There were, I think, 38, forgive me if I'm a vote or two off because I don't remember exactly, 38 or that they said, 38 for Kirsten, I believe it was, and 37 for Rick Green. But there was one vote that said RG, and they were not counting it because that was supposed to be a Rick. You know, you're supposed to write the whole thing. Really, it says RG. It says RG. So after about, Deb, maybe you can help me out, an hour of back and forth, and the floor just. They went back into the back room. There was a whole argument over whether or not there should be another count of that vote. There was a whole ridiculous back and forth cluster of whether or not they should recount. They finally did. Magically, one of those abstentions or something was found that said Kirsten Green. Or I'm sorry, Kirsten Hughes. And she got the 39 to Rick's 38 at that point, and everybody was told to go home, basically. A whole lot of people, probably 38 or 39 of them, weren't happy with those results. They called a special meeting. Rules on the state committee rules, you are allowed to, if you've got 15, I believe it is, 15 folks, state committee folks, to sign on to a special meeting, you can call a special meeting. Well, those folks called their meeting. That was fought tooth and nail by the state committee. They didn't want to participate. They didn't want anything to do with that. However, some positive things did come out of that. Steve Aylward is one of the people who was first and foremost on that. And all of those people that put their name to that, boy, they have targets on their backs now, big time. They're looking to, well, they want to get rid of all of us. They want us to just go away. Be quiet. Sit down in the corner and be quiet. It's not going to happen. Not likely. But they did manage to get some good things come out of that. They had, some of you in this room are familiar with Vince DeVito, right?
Dumb.
Evil personified. They fought him. They fought the whole the process. The process was flawed to begin with. There's now, and Deb could probably speak better to this. I can't got invoked, but what they got invoked. This is in place now. Process is in place where there'll be no backroom voting counting. There'll be no cigars involved, and Ron DeVito or Vince DeVito back in the room saying, you know, okay, well, you know, I'm gonna vote on the floor. Not gonna be able to do that in the future. So there's positives that have come out of that. They're working towards getting the just more transparency. You know, there's rules in those bylaws we gotta keep an eye on because they amend them. They sneak little things in. I'll never forget back when in the 12 primary, I got a call because we had 3 of us, I guess it was, working on the grassroots campaign for Rick Santorum for the primary. He needed 15%, we know that, to get in any type of delegate counts here in Mass. What we didn't know was that Massachusetts has, their GOP has a little clause inside of one of their bylaws that states that if a primary opponent or a primary candidate gets 15%, before that 15%, before the primary, they need to have a chair in place. A chair to present their delegate to the Mass GOP. Otherwise, it's not going to count. I didn't know that. I don't know if there's a lot of people who know that, but I got a call pointing it out to me. And it was just one of those little moments where you go, wonder what else is written in those rules that we don't know about until after the fact. This is the type of shenanigans and lawlessness and disgusting cheatership things that they do. And this is what we're fighting against, and this is part of what Maura and all the grassroots in the state have been, uphill battle for years. But the strides that we're making have been amazing, phenomenal, incredible. Deb Martell, the other folks, Marie, Mark Bergeron, the folks that are on the state committee, and the job that they've done, the language they got put into that platform, phenomenal. And we cannot thank you enough, because it's people like you who are keeping us from becoming Cuba.
Thank you, Tiffany. And now Linda Zern will be coming up to discuss the Mass GP 2014 State Convention.
Thank you. I just want to let you know that I was an independent and unenrolled all my life until a year ago, when I decided it wasn't enough just to be a Tea Party person, that the only way you're going to make some change is to become involved in the Republican Party. So I joined Mara, and I became a Republican, and I was really enthused about going to the convention because I'm also a selectman. This is my third term. I've run 4 times and won 3. And I knew Mark Fisher was running, and I wanted to be able to go to the convention and vote for him. So it was worth becoming a Republican just to do that. And I was so excited about going. It was my first time going to a convention. I was looking forward to it. We had 2 buses from the Cape. The Alice and Roger were there as well. The convention dragged on for biased. It seemed biased. Charlie Baker got music when he came on stage, and Mark Fisher didn't. They had fanfare for Charlie Baker. Mark Fisher just got, quite applause. So the meeting was supposed to be finished by 2:30. It didn't finish till 3:30, and our bus was supposed to be there at 3:30 to pick us up. The voting started, and some people were walking around, didn't even know that the voting was taking place. So they didn't even announce that. Some of the people that came in the bus with us were chit-chatting with us, and they were supposed to be up in another section voting. So we finally took the vote, and we didn't know what the process was, but somebody came down the aisle, our state committee woman, and she had the tablet in her hands, and it was sort of facing down like this, and she was standing here. So she asked Mark Swan next to me who he was voting for, and he said Mark Fisher, and she marked that column. She asked me who I was voting for, and I said Mark Fisher, and she marked this column, a different column. So if her tablet hadn't been facing down like that, but I asked her about it, and I said, "Are you sure that?" And she column, and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I made a mistake, but I can't erase it, so I'll just circle it." Well, Mark Swan said that she circled his check also. So we don't even know what that means, whether those votes were counted or they weren't counted, or what they were counted for. There's no way to go back. But she continued on taking the vote. And she only went halfway down the aisle. There were probably about 15 people in each row. She was about halfway down, and each person had to shout across the rest of us who they were for. Well, Marco Allegro was running for office, and he's sitting there with other Republicans who he wanted to support him. And he knew if he said Mark Fisher, they probably wouldn't support him, but he said Mark Fisher anyway. So that's the kind of pressure they put on you. And during the whole time they're talking about unity, and we all have to have unity in the party. So thought the bus was going to take off without us, but we sat there much longer waiting for the count to be taken. It took hours, and then we had one figure, and then they changed it about half an hour later to something else, and then we thought Mark won the 15%, and then they said he didn't. It was only 14 point something percent. And then somebody said, oh, that's just what happened last year too. And I thought, oh, you know, that's strange. So, a couple of weeks later, I saw something on YouTube that had the votes taken. You know, they had the YouTube of it, and there were only 9 or 10 blanks that they counted in the YouTube. And meanwhile, they said there were 64 blanks altogether. So I don't know where those blanks came from. But if nothing else comes of us meeting here, I hope that we can at least get an honest way of voting at the next convention. We all had name tags. It would be very easy to have a little, you know, paper behind your name. You pull it out, you check off the person you want, and you put it in a ballot box, and it's counted within an hour. Wouldn't that be so simple to do? Instead of going up and down the aisles and checking people off and marking them in the wrong column and then fighting for 4 hours on, you know, who should have voted, who didn't vote, and everything else. So that was my experience, and I thought it was the most despicable event that I've ever seen that had to do with politics. And I saw an email later from one of my constituents in town that went to a couple of our politicians, our local politicians. One of them actually said, well, that's the process that we have. If Mark Fisher had had his delegates there, he would have had enough votes. So I emailed back to my reps who were CC'd on this and said, this was the most despicable thing I've ever seen. And Mark Fisher did have his delegates there. The whole system is corrupt. So,
and now we have Attorney Jesse Limerick, who was proxy voted by the faculty on the 2014, going to speak on the 2014 convention.
Sutton, Massachusetts. I am an elected official. I am a member of the Sutton School Committee. I am a former candidate for state rep. Of course, I lost against the machine, but that's a story for another day. But I, as an elected official, had the opportunity to participate in Sutton's RTC preliminary meeting, in which the delegates were chosen for our town to go to the convention. At the meeting, it was my first time, I'll be honest with you. You know, I'm a college professor. I teach this stuff theoretically. You know, I spend time dealing with college freshmen and their idiosyncrasies. So I'm used to dealing with that. So my entry into politics, you know, came from a theoretical perspective. I did it because, you know, this is what I've been talking about, and I wanted to become involved. You know, that's why I ran for the school committee. You know, I was just an angry, pardon my French, but pissed off parent who was upset with the way things are going in the district, and I wanted to see if I can get in there and, you know, bring about some change. So, long story short, because of my outspokenness in 2012 decided to write my name in as a write-in candidate to become a member of the RTC. So not only was I invited to the town RC meeting because I was ex officio, but I was also a member. Of course, like many RTCs, Sutton does not have an active RTC. We met twice in the 2 years' time. One was shortly after the initial election, and once was this meeting, this convention, to select our delegates. So I went in there again, just trying to observe the process, just trying to experience it, and also try to participate. So again, we're going to keep it short. We had a presentation about who the gubernatorial candidates were. On one hand, we had Charlie Baker, and all the praises and platitudes of what he is going to bring, how he is going to save the party, how he is going to win. You know, I know. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? I'm sure we've all heard it before. So I sat back and I took it in. And then, after the praise for Baker was done, Mark's name was mentioned for the first time. Hey, I just gotta let you know, there's this guy named Mark Fisher from Shrewsbury running, and we don't really know anything about him, and he really doesn't stand a chance. So why don't we vote to maintain unity? Buzzword that we've heard a bunch of times. Unity. So why don't we pre-endorse Baker, and then, as delegates, you would all have the opportunity to vote again. Again, I had no idea what was going on, and I'll admit it was my own fault. So I just raised my hand and said, okay, and went along with the flow. In the meantime, Mr. Fisher starts sending, I'm assuming because I'm a delegate, or maybe I was just, but his mailers. And the first one came in, okay, it was pretty impressive. We had a common hairdo, which is I like that very well. And I put it aside, put it on my desk, and I'll get to it later. Then the next one comes, and then the next one comes. And I just actually take time to sit down and read. Hey, this man stands for something that I believe in. I go on his website, I dig more. I watch a couple of YouTube clips, I learn more. I am excited. I have a chance to vote for Mark Fisher. Fast forward, as mentioned by Linda, as was mentioned by Linda, it was long. It was drawn out. My district, we were at the extreme back end of the arena, so we had a good view, but I mean, talk about being really out of the loop. We just kind of sat back and watched things proceed, and it just seemed to drag on and on and on. Well, Charlie Baker comes up, music's playing, everyone's excited, Mark speaks. It was quiet, but I sat back and yeah, this is the guy. This is the guy. Yeah. But as Linda mentioned, after the speeches were concluded, not once was it mentioned, well, now delegates, it's time to vote. I didn't even have our district's representative walk up down the aisles. I didn't even see her. So I assumed, okay, well, okay, this is going to happen. They're going to make an announcement. Maybe we're going to go up along, you know, the mezzanine level, and maybe that's where we vote. So I get up hungry, so I grab lunch. I was hungry, so I grabbed lunch, and then I come out my seat, and the next thing I know, all my fellow delegates start leaving. I'm like, well, what's going on? What did we miss? Oh, we already voted. That happened back in January. So, now in the meantime, just to let you know, I ran into Mark. I ran into him a few hours before he gave his speech. And I went up to him and I shook his hand. I said, you know something, Mark? I like what you have to say. I agree with your principles. And I am going to be honored to vote for you on this day. And I'm sure he sat back, okay, this is just a bother, you know, crazy guy. But, you know, he shook my hand, he took my card. We had exchanged a nice conversation. So I was all fired up. I was excited. But, as Lynn mentioned, we were never told. We never had an opportunity. And at least for my RTC, we were never even told that our vote, our proxy vote, was binding. We were never given the opportunity to cast that vote. So I was denied that opportunity. Which, again, if we're here to talk about the reality and the shenanigans in which the Mass GOP perpetually engages in, you know, what happened to me in my little corner of the world, if that's indicative of what's going on in the 350 other districts or cities and towns, then, you know, that speaks volumes. And we as a group, we definitely have an uphill battle to fight. But I think we have one thing on our side that they don't. And we have principle, and we have passion. So this hopefully is the beginning of a better tomorrow.
Now Mark Fisher will give us an update on the status of existing lawsuit.
Thanks again, Mike. I think most of you guys know that there's an existing lawsuit. I had to file a lawsuit to get. Some people don't know it. They put on the ballot. A little bit of background. Going into the convention, we knew, like I mentioned earlier, there was voter tampering. They think what happened with the mall. And then weeks before the convention, we found out that the Mass GOP could not find enough Republicans to come to the convention to get my vote total to be below 15%. So they were scouring all over the place. We were getting lists of delegates. And we found out that there were a number of unenrolled, not Republicans, but unenrolled people who were claiming to be registered Republicans sitting at the convention. And also one registered Democrat who was going to be a delegate at the convention. We found this out prior to. So my campaign contacted the executive director of the decision, told him about the situation, and this was his response to us. Kirsten Hughes is the chairwoman. She can do whatever she wants. If you don't like it, you can go to the convention and try to get 2/3 of the delegates to agree with you. But good luck in getting a chance to get notified at the podium. That was our response. So again, this is what we had going into the convention. By the way, the convention was exactly 7 months to the day today. So right about this time, we're in the back rooms, we're finding out that we didn't get our 15%. And I talked with our staff, can we file a lawsuit? And the response was this: listen, if you file a lawsuit, it's going to be dragged out, it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, it'll do what they did to Christine My House. Your campaign will just die and it's all over. I left the convention thinking it's all over. The following night, I started hearing from delegates about what happened, and that's when we decided to file a lawsuit and try to get some summary judgment going. What happened was we filed a lawsuit. The judge split the lawsuit into 2 parts. The first part was expedited. It was supposed to be heard in the middle of June, and the whole issue was, did the Mass GOP follow their own rules, and did Mark Fisher get his 15%? When it seemed like the judge was going to rule in our favor, and actually in one of his decisions, he cited Robert's Rules of Order, which is part of the Mass GOP convention rules, and he quoted the part where it says, blank votes are like trash paper. They do not count. When the Mass GOP saw that, they agreed to put me on the ballot, so that dismissed the first part of the lawsuit. The second part of the lawsuit deals with damages and possible criminal activity. That was not expedited. That can play out for the next 2 or 3 years. But that's what I want to update you about right now. Here's the thing. Ed McGrath was invited here today. He couldn't make it. Probably a good thing for him. But he's the general counsel of the Mass GOP. We have a short little clip that we'd like to run for about a minute, just to let you know what he thinks about the lawsuit.
Or is not illegal? It's either illegal or it's not illegal.
What we can compensate Mr. Fisher for is his other claims, his breach of contract claims, although the judge dismissed 2 of his claims, the breach of contract claim is allowed. For example, to speak to our convention delegates, he had to pay $25,000 to help us pay for the lights and the arena and so forth. Perhaps he would look for that back.
What's so unfair about that?
He has to be able to articulate to us what those damages are.
Fine, and he articulates it, let me just be clear, he articulates it. At some point you say they're reasonable, hypothetical, I just want to understand. Those are reasonable demands. We'll give you this amount of money and we'll put you on the ballot. That would settle this from your perspective, correct?
Yes.
So it's only about how much money, it isn't whether money would pass hands, correct?
Yes, if it was a reasonable amount of damages that he could prove, that would be a possibility. I mean, we are not saying never, no way would we do that. But what we are saying is we have to put this behind us, and we have to do it sooner rather than later.
Okay, so 2 things to take away from this. The Mass GOP General Counsel has said the Mass GOP is willing to compensate me for damage that they incurred upon me at the convention, and that they want this resolved sooner rather than later. Those are the words of the Mass GOP General Counsel. So, my attorney filed a motion to compel October 2nd, earlier this month, compelled to release the tally sheets. The tally sheets, it's all about the tally sheets. By the way, I mentioned months ago, I'll mention again tonight, I'm willing to drop the lawsuit if the Mass GOP releases the tally sheets and they show what they claim they would show, no impropriety. So I made that challenge months ago. They refused to do it. While our motion to compel was countered with a Mass GOP emergency motion, because the motion that we had to compel, they had to respond within, I think it was 2 weeks. The emergency motion gave them additional time, and the judge granted that. They have until this Friday, October 24th, to respond to our motion to compel to release the tally sheets. We're guessing that they're going to drag this on and on and on. We'll see. We'll see what happens on Friday. But the whole point is this. It's the tally sheets, the tally sheets, the tally sheets. If those tally sheets are released, okay, what are we going to find? What are we going to find? I've got a list here. Okay. It comes down to this. We're going to find on the tally sheets, Democrat sitting as a Republican delegate on the Republican convention. We're going to find a number of unenrolls that are sitting there as Republican delegates and casting their votes. They didn't cast them for me. You were counted as blank or for Charlie Baker. We're going to learn about voter intimidation, because the tally sheets will then have a list of people who are going to be deposed and tell the stories that you just heard a little bit earlier.
If you find my name, let me know.
We could have had a bunch of delegates come up here and tell all these stories. What Alex is talking about is proxy voting. That's one of the things that the tally sheets will show. They will show the names of people who weren't at the convention, who weren't even in Boston that day, and who weren't even in the state of Massachusetts that day that got voted. We're going to hear about re-voting. There are people who will testify that they voted prior to the speeches. I had to pay $25,000 to get the privilege to talk to people and convince them to vote for me. But some of the Senate districts voted prior to the speeches. And when people voted for me, they were strong-armed. And they said, re-vote. And they did. And they voted for Charlie Baker. That's what the tally sheets will show. There were creation of mystery delegates. Again, they had to get the number so high that our delegates would be diluted to 15%. They're going to be just names, and there's no people associated with these names. There will be an illegal number of unelected delegates. Kirsten Hughes, Ron Kaufman, and Chanel Prunier, given their status in the Mass GOP, were allowed a certain number of delegates they could appoint, unelected delegates. That was maxed out at 350. We're going to find that number was much, much greater. We're going to find out that there were creation of blank votes. There were a certain number of blank votes, 9 or 10, at the end of the counting, and that swelled to 64. By the way, that night, we had some success in those smoke-filled back rooms. We were able to get about 30 blank votes disallowed from 2 Senate districts. We challenged them. The state committee people came into those 2 Senate districts and they said, we voted these people blank because they weren't here. And the parliamentarians agreed with us, those should not be counted. And we said, great, let's take a look at other Senate districts. Pretty fair, right? We were not allowed to do that. We were told that would be a fishing expedition, that would be a recount, and there was no provision for recounts. Even though 4 years earlier, Kamal Jain done a recount that allowed him to be on the primary ballot. So once again, it's all about the tally sheets. The lawsuit, the continuation of the lawsuit will force the release of the tally sheets and show clearly what the Mass GOP leadership did.
That's a big word, leadership in the Mass GOP.
And this is what I believe is the way forward. And this will finally clean house at the Mass GOP leadership. I think this is the way forward. This is what we need. So I'm going to continue with this. I'll update you with it as it goes forward. This Friday we hear a little bit more about it. And once again, I think this is the way that we finally get what we want. And just stick to it and persevere. So thank you.
Can I ask a question, Mark? Can I just ask one question of you? Has there been media interest in the what's coming out on Friday?
Well, I'll answer that one. I know you guys, a lot of you people come from a long way, and I don't want to drag on, but everything I just said now, I gave to the media back in May. So.
Has there been recent interest in that?
No.
They don't care that what's coming out on Friday?
But again, it's in a court of law. We're going to battle
Zykovsky, who was the chairman of the Rules Committee that drafted the rules of the caucus back in 2012. He was not even allowed to attend the allocation committee. He was not notified of the allocation committee meeting in Marlborough back on May 30th, 2012. So, ready for the first?
We played the first one already.
Okay, second one then.
Second one, this is the one.
So yes, I can. Yep. So this is. Because we were asking that the provisional ballot to be open during the caucus because all the votes had to be counted before the caucus was concluded. There's nothing in the rules set forward by the Mass GOP that they drafted that stated that votes could be counted after. Everything was binding as soon as the caucuses had ended, and he didn't want those votes to be counted. So the last video that I'll show you is from Stephen Zykovsky. Again, he is the state committee member who was the chair of the rules committee that drafted the rules to say how the caucuses should be run.
That procedural matters had to be brought up at the caucus itself. And if those problems could not be resolved between whoever was making the protest and the caucus chairman, the parliamentarian at the state party would be standing by all during that morning until all the caucuses were open at the state committee headquarters to settle any disputes that came up. Now, the chairman of the allocation committee here tonight was also a candidate for delegate. He was also a member of the rules committee. He's also an attorney. So he knew the rules and he knew the procedure, and he never complained about anything at that caucus. Nothing happened until the results came in and they weren't what they wanted. And that's my complaint. And I had no dog in this race. I was not a Ron Paul supporter. I did not even attend the caucus in my district, in the 6th National District. And my purpose in being here, I was the chairman of the Rules Committee, as I think I may have mentioned. It's just that I wanted to see fairness. And this would be a great injustice if they overturn the election. Have they made a decision yet? Sounds like they haven't made a decision. I don't think they're going to make a decision tonight. They're going to do it when there's no crowd around. I've served on the state committee for 26 years, and I've never been barred from a meeting of a state committee before tonight. This is the first. So there's some really bizarre things going on here. 26 years on the Republican State Committee. So, whatever it's worth. Thank you very much. Well, I'm glad to talk to you.
And thank you for your time and for watching the videos.
Okay, now Mark is going to give us a summary.
Let's run the Reagan video first.
Yeah. What would you like first? The pastel?
Yes. So many of you may have seen this before, but it's always worth seeing again.
You know, in spite of all our greatness, our people feel a sense once again, or a desire to feel a sense of greatness. A sense and a pride in their own capacity for performing great deeds. We Republicans, I think, can do something about this, but not if we try to be all things to all people. There are some in our midst who suggested that we should broaden our base accepted what they mean by broadening our base is to blur the image, to make us indistinguishable from the other party. Some have suggested that the 1974 election, the disastrous results, were an indictment of what we stand for. Well, may I suggest that the meaning of the last election will not be found among those who voted. It will be found among polling those who stayed home, the biggest non-voter bloc in our nation's history. And why did they stay home? Well, because they said they couldn't see any difference between the two parties. I think they're basically wrong, but I think this is also an indication of what our answer should be to those who would make us more like the opponents. I am a convert to Republicanism. I spent most of my adult life as a Democrat, and I can testify that when I found I could no longer follow the lead, I became a Republican not because the parties were the same, because they were different, precisely because they were different. More than half of those who didn't vote have been polled and say it no longer makes any difference which party wins. Now some have taken another course. There are some among us, and I respect their views, who suggest that that means an end to the Republican Party, that we should form a new third party. May I suggest an alternative to that? Let's have a new first party, a Republican Party, raising a banner of bold colors, no pale pastels, a banner instantly recognizable as standing for certain values which will not be compromised. Yes, we must broaden our base, but let's broaden it the way we did in 1972. Because those Americans, Democrats and Independents and Republicans, are still out there looking for a banner around which to rally. And we have what they want, what they're seeking, but they don't know that. And sometimes I wonder if we know it.
I think the amazing thing about that speech, it was given almost 40 years ago. The problems that he's talking about are right here now, exactly here now. Talking about watering down our principles, talking about becoming a third party or becoming more like Democrats. The solution is the same solution that he had 40 years ago, and it's running strong on our principles and not compromising on them. Not being watered down, not blurring into the Democratic Party. We just have to have a lot of us like this working together to do what he did 40 years ago. When he talked about bold colors, right? Don't not be afraid to talk about our strong principles and beliefs. This is the truth. Let's talk about it boldly. You know, bold colors get watered down and become different shades or different hues. Bold reds become weaker and weaker. They take on different hues. They become pink after a certain period of time. And I'm not saying that there aren't different hues that are okay. What I am saying is that there are hues that are very dangerous. And for Massachusetts Republican conservatives, the most dangerous hues is Kirsten hues. Under her short leadership, 10% of our membership has left the party. And rhinoism has become the standard for the leadership. Okay, what do I mean by this? Rhinos are Democrats that call themselves Republican. So we have Gabriel Gomez, who financially supported Barack Obama.
You don't even need to see it.
And then we have former Governor Bill Weld that not only financially supported Barack Obama, but actually voted for Barack Obama. And what did the Massachusetts leadership do recently? Just a few months ago, they honored Governor Bill Weld, the guy who voted for Barack Obama. They gave him the Lincoln Reagan Award. Now you would think that Bill Weld, after getting such an award, right, might come to his senses and say, hey, what's going on here? He's doubled down, he's tripled down. It was just last week. He endorsed against a conservative Republican in a competitive race here in Massachusetts. This is rhinoism. They love stomping on conservatives. They've done it repeatedly. They've done it over and over again. I don't want this whole thing tonight to become one big pity party and feel sorry for ourselves, right? It's in order to say, listen to what they've done. They've done it repeatedly over and over and over again, and it's time to do something different. So what do? I have 5 suggestions. The first one is investigate the Republican assemblies. You don't have to join. Look at them. Take a look at their website. I think they've only been in Massachusetts maybe 8 years or so, 7 or 8 years.
I've been around a little longer than that. We've re-energized and regrouped in the last 4 or 5 and going in a new direction now.
Okay. Learn what Ronald Reagan said about them. You know, it's the reform. They call themselves the Republican wing of the Republican Party. A lot of groups, there's a lot of conservative groups here listed, that's the short list. They've been infiltrated and influenced by the mass GOP. The way that Mara handles this, it's not perfect. In order to join Mara, you have to have a conservative sponsor you. And you have to agree. You have to initial. The same things that Reagan talked about. Take a look at that. Take a look at that. The second thing, don't be followed by someone who has an R next to their name when you go and vote for them. And R can stand for rhino just as well as it can stand for Republican. What's the test, right? What's the test? Republicans, we have a wonderful platform. True Republicans stand on the platform. And rhinos can't run from it. They can't stand to be near it. They run from it. This is the test. You want to find out where your candidate is, a rhino or Republican, see how they agree or disagree with the Republican platform. Scott Lively is a conservative independent for governor. He spoke out about this. He talked about voting for the lesser of two evils. Please learn more about Scott Lively. Thirdly, we can be more effective with a united front. Quick story. Primary day, I'm holding a sign outside the polling booth, and my phone is ringing. I can't play the phone. 9 people voted for me that day. As I talked to them on the phone, they didn't know that I was pro-life. They didn't know that I was pro-Second Amendment. Even though I filled out the Gun Owners Action League questionnaire back in January, even though I filled out the Mass Citizens for Life questionnaire back in February, we can do a more effective job. If there are issues out there or ballot questions or candidates, we need to get behind them and support them early and often. Number 4, us, members. We may belong to some of these groups or multiple groups. We as members need to network better. Whether or not the leadership of our group is with us strongly or not with us at all, or whether they've been infiltrated by the mass GOP or taken over by the mass GOP, this is what this meeting is about. So the 5th thing is, if you'd like what you heard, if you're upset, if you want to do something, please give us your contact information. There's some free 5 cards. Write down some suggestions you may have. Tell your friends about what we're trying to do. We're trying to better network together. We don't need another conservative group. There's plenty of them here. But we want to better network together, communicate together. Again, so when issues, questions, referendum questions, we can get behind, come up. We can get behind them and support them the way they need to be in order to win here in Massachusetts. We'll meet again. This is in more of a working environment. This is more of a informational meeting. I want to have let Ronald Reagan have the last word. So he's got, I think, a 1-minute clip that we'll leave you with. So thank you.
I remember the story of a fellow who was running for office as a Republican, and he was in a rural area and it wasn't known to be Republican, and he stopped by a farm to do some campaigning. And when the farmer heard he was a Republican, his jaw dropped and he said, "Wait right here till I go get Ma. She's never seen a Republican before." So he got her, and the candidate looked around for a podium from which to give his speech. The only thing he could find was a pile of that stuff that Bess Truman took 35 years trying to get Harry to call fertilizer. So he got up on the mound, and when they came back, he gave his speech. And at the end of it, the farmer said, that's the first time I ever heard a Republican speech. And the candidate said, that's the first time I've ever given a Republican speech from a Democratic platform.
Well, thank you all for coming this evening. There are 3x5 cards on the table, so if you'd like to put down maybe 1, 2, or 3 ideas or groups that would like to join, please sign them and do them at the front desk as you're going out. Thank you.